Dr. MIKI Ben-DOR, thanks so much for coming on to Evolution Soup all the way from your office in Tel Aviv. You are a paleoanthropologist affiliated with the Department of Archaeology, Tel Aviv University, researching the evolution of our ancestors during the Paleolithic. Your hypothesis describes the quirks of fate that forced our hominid ancestors to eat and hunt in different ways, leading to bigger and smarter brains. Welcome to the show, MIKI. It must be really gratifying to be getting so much feedback about your work, especially having started your research relatively late in life.
Right. Of course, I would have loved to get some more response, but coming so late to the scene, I don't have many personal friends among my colleagues, but my collaborator, Professor Keituu, has more, and I get most of the responses from him, what he gets from other people. And I must say, of course, when it comes directly to you, they are mostly the positive ones. But sometimes the negatives one also get through somehow.
MIKI, let's just hear a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up, and can you describe the road that led you to where you are now?
So I started my career when I was actually 61. I published the first paper. I was not studying at that time. I did my BA in economics and my MBA, and I worked till I was about 52 years old, and then I retired. And at certain stage, I started, because I loved hunter-gatherers, since my early days in the university, I looked for them for a model to explain many things in our life, like we are really hunter-gatherers that live today in a completely different environment. So I went to study hunter-gatherers in the Department of Archaeology in Tel Aviv University. And at 68 or so, I got my PhD and went on to publish, together with my collaborator, Professor Keituu, I think what is probably the first unifying theory of human evolution. Unifying in the sense that it explains most of the key phenomena in human prehistory. And very simply, it was declining prey size that forced humans, created some pressure on them, energetic pressure, to get smaller and smaller animals with the same energetic reward that actually caused most of the behavioral and physiological phenomena that we see in prehistory.
On this show, we talk about our hominid ancestors quite a bit, often tackling the subject of brain size and brain intelligence. Your hypothesis addresses not only those subjects, but many others as well. And it all revolves around the energy the body needs. Isn't that right?
That's correct. Energy is key. Being an economist by education, I feel very comfortable with energy expenses, energy rewards, and all the economy of the body, and really found that the sentence that is true for economists, like follow the money if you're looking for explanations, is really follow the energy when you look for explanations in biology, especially in evolution. An energy is a constraint for animals, for any biological creature, but animals, in our case, humans, we cannot spend more than a certain amount of calories per day, and we also find it difficult to obtain more than a certain amount of calories per day. So we have to maintain a budget, and whatever happens that affect that budget has to cause us to adapt ourselves. So the theory goes that prey size declined. I will later go on into why it declined, but humans were carnivores, consuming prey, and that was a major part of their nutrition. This we covered in another paper called the evolution of the human trophic level. And since it was a carnivore, whenever prey size declined, it had to obtain smaller prey. Now, why was it so attached to large prey is because of another constraint, and this is the protein constraint. So humans cannot metabolize for energy more than about 35% of the energy. And that is completely different in other predators, that are like lions and wolves, that are predators for a long, long time, probably 40 million years or so. And we are predators only maybe for 2 million years. So they can metabolize 70 and over percent of their calories. Now humans can metabolize only 35%, so they have to get 65% from non-protein sources. And this means there are only two of them, fat and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are found mainly in plants, and fats are found mainly in animals. It so happens that for humans, to obtain energy from animals, the energetic return is about 10 times higher than obtaining it from plants. And this also points to the evolution of us as carnivores. Because, for instance, in chimpanzee, the relations are not the same because chimpanzee is built to obtain carbohydrates in a much easier way than we do. So when this is the situation, and you have to get 65% from non-protein, that means that you will get a very large percentage of your calories from fat. Obviously, humans also consumed plants. There's no argument about that at all. But still, probably 50%, 35% of this 65% had to come from fat. And large animals are fatter in relative terms than smaller animals. Not only they are fatter, but they maintain their fat for a long period of time, even in dry conditions, because they can consume lower quality forage. So humans were kind of dependent on large prey. And when that prey started the populations of that prey started to decline, or in some cases, large species were replaced by smaller species. For instance, there were elephants 2 million years ago that weighed 12 tons. So this is like 2-3 times the weight of the present elephant in Africa. And that one went extinct maybe 1 million years ago or so. When that changeover of species to smaller species happened, we had to find a solution to get the fat from smaller animals that contained less fat. And that was an energetic challenge. And all the adaptations that we see can be explained as adaptations to obtain smaller fat at a reasonable energetic cost. That includes the increase of the brain, the change in hunting weapons, etc., etc. Humans used the same weapons for about 2 million years. And only about 300,000 years ago, you find stone tips that were put on the spears. Okay? So for 2 million years, they hunted with wooden spears, with wooden tips. And only about 300,000 years ago, and that's at the same time when Homo sapiens appeared. So it is kind of connected, and there are a lot of people saying, a lot of researchers saying, that the larger brain of the Homo sapiens enabled them to produce these stone tips and to actually stick them at the head of the spear, which is also quite a situation. Sort of unified theory that we propose, and that includes even, let's say, the appearance of language. So language, when an economist like me read papers about language, and I must have read tens, if not hundreds of papers on language evolution, almost nobody explains or even discuss the energetic costs of language. So language needs brain space, and brain is very expensive. So if we want language, if we need language, then we must also have to gain something, energetically speaking, from language. And if you look at language, the only language that we know that is not ours, let's say sort of language, is the bees. And the bees use the language to point to other bees where the food is. So language has this particular character that it can, what is called, handle displacement in time and displacement in space. So humans could use language to point other members of the group. So say even, let's say a woman walked to the river and saw an interesting prey. She could go back to say, I saw in the river an interesting prey at that and that, in the morning, in the evening. So she could tell the time, she could tell the distance, she could tell where it is. So language at that time helped them and saved energy, yes, in finding animals. Later on, when they had to chase smaller animals, they had also to track them, because smaller animals tend to escape. Larger animals don't escape. So when they escape, you need to track them. And tracking you need to know a lot about nature in order to track efficiently. So language allowed them to teach nature or to transfer the know-how and to accumulate it, to name the thousands of things that they saw around. So this is why the energetic point of view gives you a lot of insight into what the evolution of many things. But our model explains the intensification of exploitation of resources. It explained the domestication of dogs. It explained the extinction of the Neanderthal. It explained the appearance of agriculture. It explained the shortening of cultures. Human cultures, you have the Acheulean, you have the Olduvai, you have Middle Paleolithic cultures. They become shorter and shorter and more localized as time goes. It's also explained the directionality of many things, like the brain growth. So this is why we call it unifying theory. One quite simple phenomenon explain many phenomena during human evolution.
Miki, how does the extinction of the ancient megafauna, the largest of the now extinct prehistoric mammals, come into play in your hypothesis?
Okay, as I said, megafauna was very important to humans because it contained a lot of fat. Now, there also energetically, megafauna is per, say, kilogram or caloric content is much more energetically profitable for humans because megafauna, in the biomass of megafauna among herbivores, for instance, is very, very large. For instance, there was a reconstruction of the herbivore community in Africa several thousand years ago, and this guy found that the elephant composed 50% of the biomass of herbivores. So there were not many items, but each item weighs so much that in the total calculation, the biomass of the megafauna is very high. So as an economist, again, you look at the environment and you actually want to exploit the resource that is more prevalent and will give you more, easier to find in terms not of the number of animals, but of the biomass that you are interested in, and especially in our case, fat. So large animals are very important. And just in a recent paper we published, we identified three targets of human hunting, three patterns of hunting, I would say. The first one is large animals. The second one is in the next size animals. You're talking about concentrating on prime adults. Now, hunting prime adults in their best position, best fitness status is a crazy strategy for a predator. And this is why, for instance, wolves will hunt the younger and the older parts of the population. But human hunted the fittest segment of the population. That's the second pattern. The third pattern is that human exploited only parts that had a lot of fat, or bones that had a lot of marrow in them. Now, these three patterns actually can explain why these animals became sensitive to extinction. You see, large animals, when there is a predatory pressure on them, are recovering very slowly because they're, let's say, an elephant reached maturity, sexual maturity very late, maybe 13 years or 16 years old. So they can very slowly, the recovery from predation pressure is very, very slow. Prime adults are the segment of your population that is responsible for reproduction. So if humans targeted prime adults, of course they affected the reproductive potential of the population. And exploiting only part of the animal, of course, meant that humans hunted, more individuals that a normal predator that doesn't have the protein constraint would hunt. So these three patterns explain why the extinction of large animals and medium-sized animals as well happened. Now, this explains also the directionality of many of the phenomena that we see in prehistory, including, of course, the one that is unquestionable, and this is the increase in brain size. So brain size increased from maybe 400 cc to 1400, 1500 cc in a matter of 2.3 million years. Of course, it didn't increase every day of that period, but the general trend was up and up and up. And that is very difficult to explain by the Darwinian model, because the Darwinian model is relying on the selection pressure from, let's say, climate, which is the main selecting pressure that you used in Darwinian models. Well, climate fluctuates, so it's impossible to explain 2.3 million years of the same direction with climate. So when we need to use another model, and there is another model, quite recent, recent like 30 years ago, that is added to the Darwinian model, and this is the niche construction theory. Niche construction theory actually say that inside the niche, animals can affect each other and themselves when they build their niche. So it's not only the big forces of nature that affect evolution, but also, your neighbors. And you yourself, when you build the environment, you change the environment when you act on the environment. And humans, like we said just a minute ago, acted on the environment in a way that they caused the extinction of large animals. The extinction of the large animals changed the environment, so they had to change themselves and adapt to a new environment. So they were creating their environment, changing it, and in a feedback process, caused that directionality. So this is how the niche construction theory explained the directionality of human evolution in many cases, not only in brain size growth.
Part of your work focuses on the growth of the hominid brain, and why it got so big has been a subject of debate for decades. Your work addresses not only why our brains grew, but why they continued to grow, correct?
Correct. I think this is unique in that respect, because many theories or hypotheses that were proposed for brain growth actually stop at one stage. For instance, if you take the cooking hypothesis that claim that or that proposes that humans needed large brain in order to control fire. Okay, so they did it and controlled the fire. So why did the brain continue to grow? Homo erectus, there is very little argument that the increase in the brain size of Homo erectus, and we are talking of quite an increase, let's say from 400 to about 1,000 cc at the end, sort of the late stage of the species, maybe even 1,100 cc's. There's little argument that at least one of the things that the large brain allowed is the acquisition of animal food. So in order to acquire plants, we didn't need that large of a brain, because we did that for quite a while, many millions of years, with a brain that was about 400 cc top, or maybe 500 cc. So there's not much argument that humans without the speed of predators, without the claws of predators, etc., could only really hunt if they were smarter. Okay, so so we hunted, and we had this paper about the evolution of the human trophic level, and we found that Homo erectus was a hypercarnivore, in fact, and I think it's quite a conclusive paper as far as I'm concerned. It presents like 25 pieces of evidence for this conclusion. Okay, so it was a top predator, so why the brain had to continue to grow? So as we said at the previous section, uh, unfortunately, this easy prey began to disappear. So they had to adjust to energetically, profitably hunt smaller prey. You see, smaller prey is faster, it's a smaller target, and it's more difficult to hunt. It's just a smaller, faster target. Another thing is that if they did it with a brain, that became costly, energetically speaking. So they had the energetic reward had to cover both the fact that the hunting of smaller animals is more energetically demanding, because you have to chase them, you have to track them, and also because of the brain group. Each brain growth had to also justify itself in obtaining a reward. And that was true until we reached agriculture. The size of the prey was so small in Israel, for instance, in the Levant, the prey size in just before agriculture went down to about 25 kilos when at the beginning, but in Israel it's about 1.5 million years ago, it was 12 tons prey. So at that time, they had to resort to agriculture, which actually increased the energetic return on plants and on domesticated animals that, by the way, according to Darwin, and it won't surprise anybody here, actually were domesticated and domesticated for fat. So domesticated animals are fatter than their, for instance, take a cow, yeah, it's fatter than a buffalo in the wild. Sheep, etc., they are fatter, and it's not so difficult to make them fatter because they really don't have to escape anymore. So they can afford to be fatter. This is how the brain continued to grow up until agriculture. The thing with agriculture is that agriculture is much simpler to do than hunting. Hunting, you have to take tens of decisions on the spot based on changing information about the tracks that you find, etc. But agriculture, you make one decision, you plant, and you wait. So you don't need such a large brain. And this may explain why brain size started to decline. It's not sure when, but let's say about 20,000 years ago, some say 3,000 years ago, but towards the end of the period, actually, brain size declined. We have a smaller brain than our hunter-gatherers predecessor had.
As with most theories, not everyone agrees with what is proposed. Miki, as far as your work is concerned, how has the scientific community reacted? What parts of your research do they agree with, and what do they disagree with?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that the scientific community didn't drop everything they had to do and they concentrated on reacting to the theory. The reactions, let's say, I will just break it down maybe to subjects. As far as the extinction goes, there's no argument that megafauna went extinct, or many species of not all of them, went extinct during the last 50,000 years. There is a debate, however, how deep in history you can find it. And we published a paper about the Levant, and we found that the process really began a million years ago, and they continued until we reached agriculture. but the reaction was, yeah, Levant is a cul-de-sac, is a small place. It's not indicative of what happened in other places. As far as Africa, East Africa, which is very relevant to human evolution, of course, there are paleontological evidence that prey size or that herbivore species sizes began to decline or declined. Actually starting 7 million years ago, but it continued until just now. At the beginning, 7 million years ago, it was because of the replacement of the vegetation from a wooded area to savanna. So the leaf eaters went extinct, and the grass eaters, there were more species of grass eaters. But in the total picture, the number of species of large herbivores went down. But about 10 million years ago, the number of species of grass eaters also began to go down. And this went against the trend in the ecology. Nobody could explain that. The problem is that archaeologists don't like paleontological explanations. They want archaeological explanations. And archaeological explanations meaning that you go to archaeological sites and you go to the faunal record and you compare the faunal record, which we did for Africa or for South Africa in this case, because in East Africa there are not too many archaeological sites that we can compare. There is one, Olorgesailie, and you see the phenomena there quite clearly, that the large herbivores are being replaced by smaller animals. But we did South Africa, for instance, and they refused to publish it because they say that in South Africa, the sites that we use, the mega herbivores don't have what they call cut marks on them. So the sites only have stone tools and animal bones, but they don't show that the humans used the tools to cut the meat. Now, the problem with very old sites is that the bones themselves, the surface of the bones, is not smooth, so sometimes you just don't see the cutting marks. And also, naturally, in larger animals, there are very few cut marks because they have a very thick periosteum. This is the layer that covers the bone. I would say that the disagreement from the community will be how deep the phenomena of prey size decline is. And this is a task that we still have to do. We still have to support our contention. And the second one is that how effective this protein constraint is, really. Now, we didn't invent this hypothesis about the protein. This was done by paleoanthropologists that specialize in zoology by the name of John Speth. And he was the one that identified the need for fat as explaining some bone composition in archaeological sites. But most archaeologists think that humans were flexible in the dietary consumption, and they could, okay, so there's no protein and fat. Okay, with small animals, they don't have fat, so humans could consume plants. But as I said, from an energetic point of view, it doesn't make sense, because it would mean that humans would have to spend much more energy to get these plants. As I said, the ratio today, or the recent ratio in hunter-gatherers, was 1 to 10, maybe it was 1 to 5, but still, it doesn't really energetically, from an energetic point of view, it doesn't make sense. It just point to the fact that humans were not flexible to choose which prey to take. And so these are the main point of contentions that would prevent colleagues to accept this theory, in my opinion.
Well, it's incredible work that you and your colleagues are doing, Miki, and I just want to thank you for coming on to the show today to share your research with us. So what's next for you? Any new projects you can tell us about?
Well, the first and most important project for me is to write a book. Because what I said now, what I told you in this interview, is you can find it in maybe 5 or 6 papers, maybe even a little, maybe more even. But I want to put everything in one book. And this may take a year or two to do, as I also, of course, research the areas that I'm writing about again. And then, we will write, probably we're trying to publish some more papers that contain insights that are based on this hypothesis, unifying hypothesis. And that's about it. That will be enough. It'll keep us busy for a while.
Miki Ben-Dor, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark. It was a pleasure being on your show, which I appreciated very much. I've looked at many of your, pieces, and I think they are as good as, that really students of paleoanthropology could benefit from looking at them.